Well, good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to Eagle Glen Golf Club and to our economic forecast. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here. Okay, that is really weak. So we've got a full agenda and we need some excitement and enthusiasm in the room. So Dr. Thornburg traveled many minutes, almost hours, to be here to share with you. So good afternoon and welcome to Eagle Glen Golf Club. Let's get some excitement. Let's go ahead and show how much you like being here. That's still not good enough. Seriously, I need you guys to go back to your high school days and get wild and crazy. We are here to have a good time. We are here to hear some great information. We're going to honor 4 incredible individuals that will be introduced in a minute. But at this time, I'd like to welcome you to our beautiful town of Corona. Let's hear it for each and every one of you being here today. Well, I just want to say on behalf of the Corona Chamber, we're honored to be able to partner with some incredible other chambers. And if you're from those chambers, I want you to just show your love and appreciation for them. So we are partnered here with the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Brea Chamber of Commerce, and the Yorba Linda Chamber. And let's give it out for the Corona Chamber. So together, all of us worked hand in hand to make sure that this was a success today. And if you are happy with it, thank your fellow execs, tell them how much you appreciate them. If there's any problems whatsoever, something that you're not happy with, you can come see me, okay? With that being said, Dr. Thornburg will be providing us a roadmap that will aid in the success of your business. We will begin today with the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't want you to stand yet because I'm going to introduce our county supervisor, and she's got a word or two to share with you about the pledge and about our flag. Please welcome our county supervisor, Karen Spiegel.
Okay, everybody's asking. The Women's Conference, you'll hear more about it. We have superpowers. You know, quite often we just stand and we do the Pledge of Allegiance. How many of you really know what you're pledging to? Taking the time when you look at that flag and you see, what do those stars stand for? They stand for the 50 states. What do the stripes stand for? There's 13 of them, the 13 colonies. Those are the people who stepped forward and came to this country wanting a better life. And today, 246 years later, people still come to America for that better life. What are the colors? White. You know, back then it was the innocence, that purity of coming to a new place. What about red? It's that hardness that they went through, the valor that they achieved. And of course the blue, that perseverance, that justice of what they wanted in this country. So when we stand, make sure we take that to heart. And at the same time, when we stand in front of this flag and we recite those words, those 31 words that represent our freedoms, reflect on those that protected our freedoms and those that protected gave their entire life for it. How many of you would sign that blank check to protect the freedoms of other people? So we need to make sure we reflect on that. So let's stand together and recite those 31 words together. I pledge allegiance
That woman rocks. She is amazing. Sweetie, I'm going to keep you around for another 37 years. And then some. I would like for you to enjoy your salads. Meals will start being delivered shortly. If you happen to have missed the amazing dessert tables over there, many of the eateries from Yorba Linda were kind enough to donate their desserts to us, so please be sure and get some dessert. And again, I just wanted to say as we start today, I want to say thank you to my fellow chamber execs, to Lacey, to Susan, and to Zeb. I so appreciate what we've done together, and I'm looking forward to us being able to do many more things. Events like this would not be possible without the generosity of businesses and organizations who agree to become sponsors. At this time, we'd like to introduce and acknowledge our sponsors. There's more information about the Gold Executive Contributing and Elite sponsors that can be found at the exhibitors' tables. Our Gold sponsor today, Express Employment Professionals. Our executive sponsors, the County of Riverside, M&J Pallet Recycling, and Robertson's Ready Mix. Our contributing sponsors, on the first slide, we have Southern California Gas, Tri-County's Mighty Ducks. Give them a round of applause. We have Albertsons, Western States Financial Services, and Cal Baptist University. Our next slide, we have Pacific West Realtors Association, HBT Labs, Shell Roofing, and Health Services Alliance. Our next slide is the elite, and I'm going to read those off. Altura Credit Union, Camel Financial, Corona Regional Medical Center, FedEx Ground, Innovative Care Medicine, Kaiser Permanente, Lucas Oil Products, Riverside Medical Clinic, ServPro of Chino and Chino Hills. Let's give a round of applause to them. And I talked about some of the people that donated. I want to make sure that we can honor them for the different desserts, but also some other people. So these are our in-kind sponsors: Darby's, Eureka Pizza Company, Jim Dorsey Commercial Photography, Nikki's Kitchen, Rhythm Tech Productions, and the Cookie Element. Again, if we could just give a round of applause to all of our sponsors, and you're going to see one big slide there of all of them. So I'd like to, at this time, introduce one of my counterparts. He runs the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce. He is an amazing individual, recognized by our Association of Western Association Chamber Executives. He is an amazing individual. Ladies and gentlemen, make him feel welcomed, Zeb Wellborn.
Thank you, Bobby. And welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming out for lunch today and our presentation. Today, I want to do some announcements of some VIPs in the room. So I would like, in Chino and Chino Hills, we'll do a one-clap method. So let's do a sample. I will introduce a name, and you give me one clap. So let's start with the first one. Representing Congresswoman Young Kim, 39th Congressional District, Brendan Moeller. Perfect. You guys are pros. Representing California State Senator Josh Newman in the 29th District, we have Casey Condon and Brandon Wong. From the County of Riverside, we have County Supervisor Karen Spiegel. And we have Supervisor Spiegel's Chief of Staff, Phil Pauley. Deputy Chief of Staff, Deborah Rose. Field Rep, Matt Maldonado. Director of Land Use and Development for Districts 1 and 2, Tom Ketchum. Office of Economic Development, Suzanne Holland, Rob Moran, and Mike Razzo. Riverside County's Department of Housing and Workforce Solutions, we have Director Heidi Marshall, Executive Director Carrie Harmon, Board Chair Patrick Ellis, Board Member Jamil Dada, from San Bernardino County, County Supervisor Janice Rutherford, Chief of Staff Mark Taylor. Joining us from the city of Brea, we have Brenda Leone. She is the Superintendent of Brea Olinda Unified School District. We also have Assistant Superintendent of Brea Olinda Unified School District, Phil DeAugustino. From the city of Corona, we have Mayor Wes Speak. We have Vice Mayor Tony Daddario. We have Corona City Treasurer Chad Willardson. And former Mayor Eugene Montanez. From the city of Yorba Linda, we have City Manager Mark Pallone, Assistant City Manager Dave Christian, Finance Director Diana Honeywell, Yorba Linda Traffic Commissioner Anthony Johnson. And from the Eastern Municipal Water District, he's doubling up here, Board of Trustee Phil Pauley. And then we also want to give a special recognition for one of our colleagues. He was honored here last year, Patrick Ellis. He was one of our 2021 honorees as a business advocate. So let's give him a clap. Our 2022 honorees who will be properly introduced in a few minutes. We have Ashley Cole from Business Success Services, Chad Miller from Agility, Leah Peterson from SoCal Gas Company, Frank Stefano from Stefano's Golden Baked Hams. And lastly, I would like to give out a shout out to all of our chamber board of directors. If you are a board of director with any of our chambers, would you do me a favor and stand up for a second? Let's give these folks a big round of applause. The work that we all do is extremely, what our board of directors do is volunteer their time to help us grow our business communities, help us make good decisions, and so they put a lot of time, effort, and energy to help our business communities. So I specifically want to thank all of our board of directors for doing that. I also want to thank our chamber teams. So we have our Chino Valley Chamber team, our Corona Chamber team, our Brea Chamber team, our Yorba Linda Chamber team. So we could have the staff, if you guys could stand up as well. This group of folks all put a lot of time, effort, and energy to make this a success, so I personally want to thank all of them and thank you for our partnership.
My apologies. We have a former state assembly member who's retired, former mayor of the city of Corona, and he happens to be our legislative advocate as far as our chair of that, and he serves on my board of directors. Please welcome Jeff Miller.
Thank you, Bobby. At this time, I would like to invite Lacey Shane, President and CEO of the Brea Chamber, Susan Ranross, President and CEO of the Yorba Linda Chamber, to the stage for our special awards presentation.
Thank you, Zeb. Okay. Just lost my spot. Well, welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here today. We're glad to have you. This is a great turnout, and I need to get to my page here. Okay. As all of you know, our chambers rely on volunteers heavily to provide support and often become our champion for legislative issues. Today, the 4 host chambers are honoring individuals who have gone above and beyond the norm. Each of these honorees has provided legislative updates and advocacy for business in general. We are excited to introduce each one of them to you. As we begin, I'm going to ask for the representatives from the nominating chambers to come on stage. 2022 Executive Board Member for Brea Chamber of Commerce, Joe Patterson. Corona Chamber 2022 Board Chair, Paul Binder Badesha. Yes, please cheer. Chino Valley Chamber Board Chair, Josh Sun. And Yorba Linda Chamber, Jim Zuris, past chair, Anthony Johnson, chair-elect, and Phil Hawkins, treasurer. If you'll join us up here. These folks are going to be handing off the awards. Okay, so if I could have Ashley Cole with Business Success Services join us here on stage. As housing chair for the Brea Chamber of Commerce, Ashley Cole has advocated for housing projects in Brea at City Council and Planning Commission meetings over the last year. She's worked tirelessly to support housing projects that are vital to our community. Ashley has spent countless hours educating Brea young professionals and other stakeholders. She promotes pro-housing strategies and policies with Chamber leadership. Ashley is an active member of the Chamber Board of Directors, as well as our executive committee, and is a member of Tomorrow's Leaders for Cystic Fibrosis Foundation Orange County chapter. Help me congratulate Ashley Cole. Okay. Okay, we're going to ask Chad Miller. Oh, Ashley, would you like to say a couple words?
Okay, so since I'm first, be prepared. Thank you so much, Lacey, and my fellow board members for allowing me to be honored with this award. And as I told Lacey when I got the phone call for it, that I just love being in service. And so I guess just being in service and contributing back to a city that I grew up in, and pretty much my roots are there, and I'm just grateful to be able to be an advocate for my city.
We're grateful for you, Ashley. Okay, Chad Miller with Agility. For decades, Chad Miller has advocated for better jobs, safer workplaces, and common sense legislation. Quote, Chad is not one to sit idle. His demeanor and action-driven attitude are contagious, and others get motivated being in the same room where he shares. Cites Paul Bender, Badesha 2022 board chair for the Corona Chamber. Chad has traveled to Sacramento and DC to encourage policies that preserve and expand the ability of all California manufacturers to create career-building jobs for our residents. He is truly a voice for employers across California as we rebuild from the incredible challenges of just the last 2 years. On June 1st, Chad was recognized as the Small Business Advocate by Cal Chamber. Help me congratulate Chad Miller.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everyone. Thank you for the Chamber for the nomination. I greatly appreciate it. And just the work that everyone does in this room, our Chamber staff, and just the opportunity to help contribute to a better business community is just so important. So it takes an army, and I think we have a great one. But I'm very humbled and appreciative of this award. So thank you all so much, and fight on.
Congratulations, Chad. And now I'm going to hand it over to my compadre, Susan Wanross, with the Yorba Linda Chamber.
Thank you, Lacey, and congratulations to Ashley and to Chad. Leah Peterson from SoCal Gas. Leah Peterson is the Public Affairs Manager for Southern California Gas Company, has supported the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce by sponsoring chamber programs, participating in their Legislative Action Committee, and connecting President and CEO Zeb Wellborn with opportunities throughout the region to expand the impact and influence of the Chino Valley. Leah's primary responsibility in advancing the company's interests before local, state, and federal government officials in Riverside County have led her to be an integral part of their emergency response team. She is often in the trenches of disaster or war zone, lending a hand wherever needed. Congratulations.
Good. Is it noon yet? Good morning. As a representative of Southern California Gas Company, I have the honor to be given the opportunity to be able to participate not only as a board of director with the Corona Chamber, but also as a member of the Chino Valley Chamber. It has been my honor to be able to represent the Corona Chamber for 18 years, and our company has been a member of the Chino Valley Chamber for over 50 years. Don't I look good? Corona Chamber, we've been a member for over 100 years, and I have numerous other of my gas company colleagues throughout who are also members of the two participating chambers that are here today as well. I'm receiving this award because all of you are members of the chamber and you attend their events. But the reason why I'm receiving this award is because I think it's important that I bring back from my company and from the different organizations that I represent what I've learned to my chamber members as well as my chamber team, the different board of directors and people who operate, people like Zeb and Bobby, what they do so they can learn more about my business and also the businesses that I interact with. So I really reach out to you to become more engaged with letting your chamber know as we face more economic challenges in the near future, how they can help you, what they can do, and let them learn more about what you do. So again, thank you very much for this honor, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Congratulations again. And next, I'd like to bring up our very own Frank Stefano from Stefano's Golden Baked Hams in Yorba Linda. Frank Stefano is both a leader and an innovator who has brought positive change, generosity, and delicious food to the city of Yorba Linda. His mark is evident in every part of his community. I can't believe I'm going to start crying. With his hospitality and heart for charity, he has helped other businesses grow and succeed, sharing advice, best practices, and camaraderie. Through his collaboration with other entrepreneurs, his leadership has resulted in an expansion of the local economy. Frank's legacy over the past 20 years extends beyond the borders of his city and exemplifies why he is a 2022 Business Advocate of the Year. Congratulations. Do you want to say something?
I can try like hell. Those that know me know that I'm never at a loss for words, but I'm at a loss for words today. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Colleen, for starting Stefano's. When I've told the story many times when she said she wanted to open a restaurant, my family had been in the restaurant business. And I said, sweetheart, run, don't walk as far and as fast as you can away from the restaurant. And here we are 20 years later. Thank you very much to Edie and to John and to Susan, to all my good friends that have come out from Yorba Linda. When we walked in this morning, Colleen looked at these beautiful plaques and she said, I want to buy one. And then we looked at it and my name was on it. And quite frankly, that's when I lost it. So thank you. God bless everyone. We appreciate everything that everyone does. And let's keep advocating for our fellow businessmen because we're all that we got sometimes, right? Thank you.
Congratulations to all of our honorees, and well-deserved. And Bobby?
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. Hey, I've got a cell phone that was left up here on this table, so we're going to, is that yours? So we're going to auction off, but we won't, so if you'll be so kind, thank you. So I also was well, before I introduce someone that I forgot to have on our VIP list, my apologies. I know people have asked me about the awards that were given out. Real important that people know the frames were made by a veteran, and the flags themselves was by a completely veteran-owned, veteran-run, veteran employees all the way through. So those are very special to us, And so if you're interested in those, please see your chamber execs, because we've got some extras that we will use periodically, but we're not just going to flood those on out, but they're very special flags. And I'm so glad that you appreciate getting that American flag. And Colleen, I saved you a couple of bucks, okay? I apologize. I should have had Darcy Burke, Lake Elsinore Water District Director. She's an elected official. Please stand and let's give her one clap. So now they don't want to listen to me. They do more than... So, Zeb, you had it all under control. So I would like to, at this time, thank our staff at Eagle Glen, and the meals are going to be starting to be delivered right now. And we've got a couple of upcoming events that I'm going to share with you, and then we'll take a short little break so you can enjoy a little camaraderie. About a 10-minute break is what we're going to do, and then we'll get things rolling again. But first, the first slide is, first of all, understand that the Chambers of Commerce continually provide resources for its members. At this time, I'm going to just share with you a few of the upcoming events and programs that we have. All the chambers here today are in a partnership to help our businesses take advantage of the paid family leave grants that are available for $2,000 per employee. No limitation on how many employees are on that. You can visit the website, California PFL, Paid Family Leave is what that stands for, .com, for quick and easy application. Or you can see any chamber employee that's here for information. Individually, I'd like to touch on the Corona Chamber. We want you to save gas, work local, so we've got a job fair coming up on July 23rd. You'll see everyone's got a coin on your table. That is courtesy of our chairman of the board, Paul Bender-Badisha, also one of our sponsors from Express Employment Professionals. And that coin is a challenge coin. And our theme this year is creating jobs and building a stronger local economy. And we so appreciate what she's done, and creating jobs is something that we do as a Chamber of Commerce all the time. So we would like to make sure that if there's any commuters that are traveling all the way down to LA, perhaps they can relocate to some of our businesses that were represented here. If you happen to be hiring and you need some employees, we've got until Monday for us to finalize the booths. And you can see the team over at the booth that we have on an exhibit here. But the deadline is Monday at 2 p.m. if you could. We want to just help as many people get jobs as possible. Also, we have as my wife shared, the 11th Annual Riverside County Women's Leadership Conference on August 25th. And we've got one of the superheroes right here. So this will be held at Crossroads Church. It is some amazing speakers. Kathy, did you put that cape up here? I don't have my cape. It says here, put the cape on, but that's okay. Real men show up, by the way. And as I've learned over the years, there's two words besides yes, dear, that are important, but we can learn so much from these women. If you want tickets, the discounted price ends today, so that's the early bird special. There you go. Yeah. The crap I do for you ladies.
It's all for the chamber, Bobby. It's for you.
Yes, dear. Okay, where was I at? They have a booth over here, so please get your tickets if you'd like to sponsor, if you'd like to exhibit there. It'd be a great opportunity for you. So for the Brea Chamber of Commerce, they have the Mayor's Cup Mayor's Golf Tournament at Black Gold Golf Club, Friday, August 12th. It is an early morning, Beat the Heat profile networking event that brings out the major business leaders. Encourage you to go out there, mingle with the city of Brea, as well as its city's representatives, including the mayor of Brea. Anyone interested and encouraged to attend, be part of the golf tournament. Please connect with the Brea Chamber. You can see Lacey for that if you've got any questions. So that is, again, on August 12th. For the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce, they have their annual awards and recognition dinner on Wednesday, August 17th, held at Chaffey College Chino Community Center recognizing impactful Chino and Chino Hills businesses and their installation of their board of directors. They have a second event. It is a golf tournament on September 12th at Los Serranos Country Club, and it will connect Chino Valley businesses and support their efforts to be a catalyst for business growth, a convener of leaders and influencers, and a champion for a stronger community. You can see Zeb or any of the people from the Chino Valley Chamber for more information. And then for Yorba Linda, for only $55, you get to experience the taste of Yorba Linda on Friday, July 29th. I'm told this event will sell out quickly. The Orange County experience featuring local restaurants, wineries, and breweries. Entertainment, live entertainment, will be from King Salmon and the Funk Yard Horns. And again, they will be playing live. Come party with Yorba Linda. See Susan for more information. At this time, I'd like to bring up Zeb.
Thank you, Bobby. All right, hi again, everybody. It's with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Christopher Thornburg. Well known for his ability to capture and hold audiences, Dr. Thornburg has presented to hundreds of leading business, government, and nonprofit organizations across the globe, including Chevron, The New Yorker, Colliers International, the California Chamber of Commerce, City National Bank, the California State Association of Cities, State Farm Insurance, the City of Los Angeles, the California and Nevada Credit Union League, and the National Steel and Shipbuilding Company, among many others. He has testified before the U.S. Congress House Committee on Financial Services about municipal debt issues, before the California State Assembly Committee on Revenue and Taxation regarding rule changes related to Proposition 13, and before the Los Angeles City Council about proposed changes to local minimum wage laws. Dr. Thornburg is a contributor to monthly economics polls published by the Wall Street Journal and Reuters. A well-known media commentator, Dr. Thornburg has appeared on CNN and NPR, and he is regularly quoted in major national dailies, including the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. Please welcome Dr. Christopher Thornburg.
I need a remote control. Do we have one? Good morning, afternoon. Do we have a remote control? On its way. Excellent. Oh, there it is. Okay, there we go. Thank you. You know, I got to tell you, when I first got here, and they said, well, I want you to stand on stage and take pictures with people. And I had that nightmare in high school. I remember that. And I stood there, and everybody ignored me. It didn't happen today. I was glad to see that. It didn't actually pan out the way it did in that nightmare, so thank you very much. It did actually make me feel very, very special, actually being here today. As always, really enjoy interacting with the chambers down here. Interacting, of course, here with Riverside County. I see some good friends from San Bernardino as well. So it's great to be here. And we have a lot to talk about. So I'm going to stop pontificating and just get right into it. We have been through an interesting few months, to say the very least. If you've been paying attention, okay, do we have a remote control? There we go, let's see. Okay, on. All of a sudden, look what we're seeing. Jamie Dimon bracing himself for an economic hurricane. Consumer confidence is dropping. Mark Zandi's telling us the housing market just slid into a full-blown correction. Stocks are in a bear market. Gas is $6 a gallon. And, of course, the Wall Street Journal Next Recession Survey, of which, yes, we do contribute to, currently gives the chance of recession in the next year, puts it at 45%. In fact, not too long ago, I saw some character from, I think it's called High Speed Economics in New York, basically come out and say, we're already in recession. I know what you're talking about. We're already in recession. And it just, doesn't this kind of bring back memories, right? I mean, look, you look at the same cast of characters who told us that the pandemic was going to turn into a depression. And these were the same guys who told us back in 2019 we were going to have a recession. Now, back then, COVID didn't even exist, right? As far as we know. At what point in time do we start to see the pattern here? And the pattern, by the way, is not that the U.S. economy is tipping into a recession every year and a half. Rather, it's the same cast of characters out there with these preposterous headlines scaring us for reasons I can't quite understand. Thank you. But the big point here is beware the narrative, right? Beware the narrative. Now, what do I mean by that? I think I talked about this a little bit last year, but for a long time, if you remember, prior to the pandemic, I was talking about miserableism. That was a great punchline. And when I talked about miserableism, what I was talking about was the gap between economic realities and our, if you will, political narratives, our social narratives. Because after the Great Recession came to an end, and year by year, things got better and better, and the economy improved more and more, and our conversation about the economy got worse and worse. I mean, by the end of last decade, we had convinced ourselves that 70% of Americans were on the, living hand to mouth, starving on their feet, and were one paycheck from being homeless. I mean, we convinced ourselves of that, despite the fact that the data showed us in one of the strongest expansions we had ever been on, candidly, an expansion that would have continued but for the pandemic. Yet we had to constantly diminish it. Now, what's interesting about that, where that becomes interesting, is a couple of years ago when Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, wrote a book called Narrative Economics. Because the thing was, is I was trained at UCLA, which back in the day was known as Chicago West. I was raised, if you will, intellectually in a school in which people are sort of rational decision makers. And in that world, yeah, thank you for the laugh, I kind of agree with that. In that world, by the way, you can ignore the story because by definition, the data drives the story. And thus, if you look at the data, why bother with the story at all? But Shiller made a really interesting point in this book, a point, by the way, that completely vindicated those conversations about miserableism. He says, this is nothing new. In fact, the idea that people base their opinions on the world around them on data is a little silly. Humans in our current sort of cultural civilized form has been around, what, a few thousand years. Data's been around 100. Data analysis has been 100 years old. Stories have been with us since the dawn of time. We are story-based creatures. You have to watch the story. But where it gets really interesting is when you start to recognize that business cycles, the up and down in economies that we see, the contraction and expansions, those very often are driven by growing gaps between narratives and reality. For example, one narrative, I don't know, say last 2004, 2005, was that you could get a mortgage that you couldn't afford to buy a house you couldn't afford, and it didn't matter because it was going to go up in value 20% forever because investors were willing to give you all the money they want because we invented some nonsensical asset-backed security that was going to take all the risk out of the process. And lo and behold, of course, we had the massive buildup that collapsed into the Great Recession. So you have to constantly look at the difference between the story and the reality because therein lies how the economy moves forward. That is how you understand what's happening. And so what I've kind of realized over the last couple of years, that my job is not sitting down looking at numbers. It's sitting down looking at the numbers and then sitting down and reading the stories. And when you put those together, that's when you can figure out what's going on. So you got to beware the narrative. So the big problem here, where our economy is right now, when you think about both the current rhetoric about a recession that's about to happen, the stressors on our economy, rising interest rates, rising inflation, where does this all come from? How did this happen? Well, again, it all starts with the narrative. Now, over the last decade, we've convinced ourselves that our economy, again, is incredibly fragile, filled with people on the economic edge. I mean, how often do you hear that terminology in the newspaper? People on the brink, the economy at a cliff. The world doesn't work that way. It doesn't. That's not how economies operate. It's ridiculous, nonsensical rhetoric, but it's a rhetoric that has an impact on us, particularly, by the way, in Washington, D.C., because the pandemic hit the U.S. economy, and don't get me wrong, it was tragic. Millions of people died. We're still obviously getting through this current wave. People are still dealing with the illness. Nothing is good about this at some level. But the idea that this was going to cause a depression, that's totally nonsensical. There's no evidence that bad epidemics have ever caused a depression. We have a pretty good measure, by the way, the Spanish flu, which hammered the world economy much worse. That was 80 times more deadly than this disease on a per capita basis. 80 times more deadly. That didn't cause a depression. What are we talking about? Oh, but don't let logic get in the way of a good story. Right? And every newspaper knows how this works. If it bleeds, it leads, people, right? So every crackpot was out there telling crazy stories of doom and decline, and D.C. lapped it up. Because all that miserableism, that narrative of decline, the narrative of fragile economy, has been pushing a populist agenda in both parties. So they grabbed this and ran with it, and next thing you know, we saw one of the most insane outpourings of policy you could have imagined. $7 trillion in fiscal stimulus. $7 trillion. $5 trillion in quantitative easing. Half again as much of what Ben Bernanke did in the face of an actual crisis. For no reason. A little bit of support would have gone a long way. This was never that serious of a tragedy, economically wise. It just wasn't. Now, where are we right now? Well, look what happens. Look, it's very obvious. We know what stimulus does. When you use too much stimulus, you overheat the economy. It's amazing to me. Take, for example, rising inflation and rising interest rates. This is not the death knell of this expansion. This is the symptom of an overheated economy. Inflation is the consequence of too many dollars chasing too few goods. No more, no less. It's a demand phenomenon. And the idea that an economy that has too much demand is going to sink into a recession doesn't really work that way, right? It just doesn't. So, no, I'm not worried about a recession right now. Operative word, right now. Because there is a real problem. And the real problem, of course, is the fact that there is a cost to the use of that stimulus. When you borrow $7 trillion, at some point you got to pay it back. When you put that much money in the economy, prices are going to re-equilibrate to a level that reflects that money supply. We haven't dealt with the fiscal consequences of what we've done. We have not yet begun to deal with the monetary consequences of what the Federal Reserve has done. We have, in fact, I would argue that they should be running as hard as possible to deal with those problems, and instead, you're so scared about a recession that's about to happen, that's never going to happen, that they're going to continue to dither and stall and delay and be too afraid. By the way, that's exactly what happened in the 70s. Year after year, they knew they were doing too much, but everybody was terrified of the political consequences of doing the right thing. Well, that happened up until the end of the 70s when a guy named Jimmy Carter, who, by the way, if you sit down and look at it, probably the best president we've had in 60 years, when he finally hired the right guy, Volcker, who came in and did the right thing. And by the way, doing the right thing caused a recession, which lost Jimmy Carter his job. You see? Now, who in D.C. is about to take that bullet? Anyone you know of? Not me. And therein lies the problem. We have big problems in this country, but it's not the problems we're talking about. And the problems we are talking about are not the problems we have. And that is what panics me. Now, where does this go? Honest to God, I tell these people all this time, if I knew that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be living on my private island with a boat bigger than Putin's. But what I do know is that there is profound economic uncertainty out there. There absolutely is. And everybody in this room needs to be worried about that. The two things you don't have to worry about is that this calamity that I'm worried about is going to hit us in the next year. It isn't. And that the Inland Empire, that of course the Route 15 corridor, where we're in the middle of right now, is going to be the center of that particular maelstrom when it actually hits. You're not. This is not your problem this time. It's somebody else's. But unfortunately, that somebody else's is basically all of us. And you're still part of that. So if I had to sum this all up before I go through my obligatory 60 slides, which is too many, I guess you could sum it up very simply this way. It's way too soon to jump in your bunker, okay? You got to go out. You got to continue to grow your business. There's a lot of demand out there. There's a lot of ability to continue to make money and grow this economy and make the Inland Empire and Riverside County the place it is becoming, which is an amazing, wonderful economy, one of the fastest growing, strongest middle-class economies in this entire nation, which, by the way, is something that Sacramento has yet to figure out. But in the meantime, you got to be cautious. You have to constantly have your finger up to the wind because this is going to come back to us, and you want to be prepared when it does happen. So don't jump in your bunker, but don't get too far away from it. And then next year, I'll update you on it. You see how that works? Wash, rinse, repeat. So, jumping right in. The V debate. Thankfully, this is finally fading. You remember? U versus V. Or you had the square root signs, the Nike swooshes, the L, we're going to hit bottom and never grow again. They put that in the LA Times. Some economists said, we're going to have an L recession, we're going to hit bottom and never grow again. And they actually put it in the paper. Why? It's just patently stupid. Well, it's scary, and that's good, right? They love that. I'm sure they put it in the headline. But again, it was a V. You could see it very clearly there, right? Just take a look. By the way, point of clarification, what is a recession? You know? Some people say, oh, it's 2 quarters of negative growth. Whatever. No, it's not. A recession is a period of time when an economy substantially performs below the capacity it has to perform. You could have more jobs, but people can't find jobs, high unemployment. That's the symptom of a recession. You can build a lot more than you're actually building. You have low capacity utilization. That's a recession. So it's what you could produce relative to what you are producing. And if you're producing a lot less than you could, you're in a recession. Now, what causes a recession tends to be some sort of big shock to the system. And there's no doubt that what happened in COVID was a big shock. I mean, we just closed down about 30% of the economy in about 2 weeks. But at the same time, it was never that, if you will, long run. It didn't have the long run consequences that a typical recession driver would. This is why we called V right from the get-go. Why? Why was this different? Very simple. If you go back in time and you think about the Great Recession, that was a traditional recession. It was a demand shock recession. What do I mean by that? Simple. In 2005, hey, I'm rich. 2008, damn, I'm not. There it is. Now, why is that important? Well, you have to rebuild. You have to have your kids' college education saved for. You got to prepare for retirement, so you save. And everybody saves, which means the economy isn't growing very well. And because the economy isn't growing well, incomes aren't going up very much. And because incomes aren't going up very much, it's hard to save. And it's that vicious cycle that kept the economy from recovering for almost 9 years from that particular shock. Now, this time around, it was not a demand shock. It was a supply shock. Again, simple way of thinking about it. 2010, you didn't go to a restaurant because you couldn't afford to. In 2020, you didn't go to a restaurant because you weren't allowed to. That's a huge difference. Why? Because the money you didn't spend on that restaurant, the money you didn't spend on Disneyland was either A, redeployed to buy something else, typically a good, or B, saved to be spent in the future. It wasn't consumption canceled, it was consumption transferred or delayed. So we knew as soon as the pandemic faded away, there was going to be a big jump. But instead, everybody flipped out. They threw tons of money at the economy. Let the games begin. Now, to be clear, our economy has recovered, fully recovered, over-recovered. And I'm amazed that this is, they're still talking about stimulus in Washington, D.C. Stimulus is something you use to make an economy recover. You don't use stimulus when the economy has recovered. And again, go back to the idea that a recession is when your economy is performing below what it could. Our unemployment rate's at 3.6%. I'm not sure how much more we could wring out of our labor force, folks. Industrial production is at an all-time high level. GDP is back to capacity. Our economy has recovered. Now, I know we got a negative growth rate in the first quarter, and there's conversations about maybe having a negative number in the second quarter. A couple of things here. First of all, when the second quarter number comes out at the end of this particular month in a couple of weeks, they're going to give us 2 years of revisions. And by the way, I anticipate some pretty significant revisions. The BEA, bless their soul, bust their butt to get these numbers out to us. But it is not easy, and there are a lot of estimates that go on. And when you're dealing with noisy data driven by problems in data collection because of COVID, in the context of some of the craziest up and downs we've ever seen, they ain't going to get stuff right the first time around. So I actually don't know what the last year is going to look like when they get that revision in. But let's say for the worst case scenario that we did end up having another negative growth rate, 2 growth rates in a row. Does that mean we're in a recession? No, because our economy is still producing as much as it could. In fact, what's interesting about this is I think about the economy in 2 different ways. We measure GDP, which is what we produce, and that dropped in the first quarter. But in the end, supply follows demand. What happened to demand in the first quarter? It grew actually by 2.64%. Demand from consumers, businesses, and the government. Spending went up. It's just that American producers couldn't supply it. So where do we get it from? The rest of the world in the form of the widening trade deficit. So there's no shortage of demand. Oh, yes, there seems to be supply problems to keep up with that demand. But the one thing I know in this world is that where there's a profit, there's a way. And they will catch up and figure it out. In the meantime, inventory levels are still crazy low. This is through June. Inventory to sales ratios in retail overall is still well below where it was a couple of years ago. For businesses, about where it was back in 2010. We were coming out of the Great Recession. Supply chains are still gummed up. There's still a few extra boats sitting off the ports of and Long Beach. We're still trying to catch up. We're not dipping into a recession. It's nonsensical. As for down here in Corona, in this particular region, Riverside overall, huge jump in taxable sales, driven by the big transfer in spending to goods, driven in part by the fact that all these warehouses that the goods are coming from are located out here in the Inland Empire. So there's some incredible numbers going on here because of all this operation. Now, services, which was the centerpiece of COVID that got closed down, is also starting to bounce back. If you've been to the airport recently, planes are busy. If you've been trying to get a flight anywhere, it's expensive. And hotels, of course, are packed. So yes, services are back. People are ready to party. Hey, look at us. You guys are not social distancing. So we're done, right? We're moving on, right? That's a good thing. But again, even here, services can't keep up with the amount of demand. They too have supply problems. Now, the kind of service supply problems I'm talking about is labor shortages. You know, prior to the pandemic, there were a little over 1 million job openings in leisure, hospitality, and other services. Right now, it's almost 2.5 million. How many restaurants have to close 2 days a week because they don't have the staff? And by the way, they realized that being closed 2 days a week is better than having 40% of your tables dark at any particular night, because that just pisses people off. So that's what they're doing, because they can't hire enough people. It's as simple as that. So it's supply that's having a trouble keeping up. Well, why can't they hire people? What about all the people they let go of? Well, listen, The employment numbers have been pretty good lately. There's no doubt about it. And, a couple 100,000 over the last few months per month. Good, solid numbers. But we're just back now to where we were pre-pandemic. And again, it has raised the question, where are the workers? Now, of course, we know what the newspapers like to do. If it bleeds, it leads. Ergo, oh, it's long COVID. They're afraid to work. They don't have the skills to work. Oh, they're all addicted to drugs. I mean, why? Why can't you? Look, first of all, just look at the data. First of all, prior to the pandemic, we had a 3.5% unemployment rate, which, by the way, was a 50-year low. And I know, hard to believe, but it turns out it wasn't driven by the policies of the previous administration. When you have a 3.5% unemployment rate, you know there's something going on in our economy, and that, of course, something is demographics. Not complicated. It's all about the boomers. All raised in families of 14 kids, they all went out and had one kid. Or not. And, of course, what that means is our population pyramid turned into a population column. And now every time a boomer leaves the workforce and retires, you have one Gen Zer pulled into the workforce, kicking, screaming, and complaining the entire way. And in that world, you're going to start running out of workers. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and we're not even talking about it. In fact, the last administration held immigrants in such disregard that they scared a lot of them from even trying to come here. When we needed them more than ever. And this isn't going to change. There is no change in this. There is no huge surge of babies coming on the pike. In a snowstorm, you get a big surge in babies 9 months later. After 2 years of the pandemic, babies just disappeared. That kind of says something about human relationships now, doesn't it? Couple days, great. 2 years? I don't care how much I love you. But of course, what really happened during the pandemic hastened a lot of trends that were already there. People were retiring, but in the tightness of the labor market pre-pandemic, people weren't quite there. Employers were begging people to stay. I'm sure I've told this story, but by a buddy of mine who was in litigation consulting. He was 62 years old. He already had his second house in Tahoe. His life was easy. And he's like, yeah, I'm done. I just want to live my life. I'm going to retire. And his bosses go, no. He said, what? He said, no. He's like, I don't think you can do that. He says, we're doing it. We're going to continue to pay you. And I talked to him 3 months later. Are you still working? Yeah. Why? I feel guilty. They keep paying me. Well, guess what happened during the pandemic when he wasn't going in the office? He said, okay, enough is enough. I'm retiring for once and for all. And by the way, so did about 3 million other people. The labor force contracted by 3 million people in 2020. We've never seen anything like it. And we have data. The current population survey asks people, why aren't you here? Now, I will admit, drug addiction is not one of the answers. But most of those people said, I retired. I just retired. Simple as that. They're gone. And they're not coming back. And now that we're trying to rebuild the economy, a combination of food, arts, recreation, which lost all those people, are having a terrible time restaffing. It's as simple as this. Now, there is an upside to it. If you're worried about income inequality, your labor market solution has arrived. Earnings growth right now in the U.S. are at a 30-year high. Earnings growth for workers, 30-year high. Almost 7% year over year right now. And for the record, low-skilled occupations are seeing faster wage gains than high-skilled occupations. And people in the bottom quartile are seeing faster earnings growth than people in the top 3 quartiles, and that's been going on since 2016. But now it's particularly dramatic, as you can see on the right-hand side of the graph here. Now, don't get me wrong, income inequality is still an issue as a nation we need to deal with. But we're moving in the right direction. Can we not give a little thumbs up for that? So yeah, that's a good thing, unless, of course, you're trying to run a business, particularly a restaurant or a hotel or an event center, because this is a real problem, and you got to figure it out. Now, of course, the games go on, too. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago, oh, Texas' economy is strong because they have more jobs now than they did pre-pandemic, where California is way behind. Oh, California's got a terrible economy. Texas is strong. Look, can we stop this nonsense? I don't care where you go in this country. I don't care where it is. Riverside, downtown LA, downtown Dallas, downtown Indianapolis, downtown Duluth, wherever Duluth is. You know what you're going to see everywhere? Help wanted signs. Unemployment rates are an irrelevant statistic. Comparing jobs today to jobs 4 years ago is stupid. There's no point in that. Every place needs people. And when you think about out here in California, again, it's not a complicated picture. Stockton's ahead from pre-pandemic. Inland Empire is. Sacramento is. Fresno is. Who's behind? San Francisco, Ventura, Orange County, Oakland. Why? Well, again, stop pretending some are good and some are bad economies. What it is labor force. What happened during the pandemic? A lot of people retired. The people who were going to retire were more likely to live in Orange County and Los Angeles than they were here. Ergo, they lost more workers than this place did. Another good thing happened for the inland parts of the state. People got out of the dense urban areas. And of course, they went inland, which again fed to the labor force here. Labor force grew in the Inland Empire over the last couple of years by 3.4%. How do you get 2.7% job growth? 3.4% labor force growth. How does LA lose 3% of payrolls? Because it lost 3.8% of its workforce. It's just workforce, people. The only question here, why does this thing keep coming up? Why does that do that? Something weird happened with this presentation. And I have no idea what it is, but we'll come back. I have no idea what happened there. Anyway, so local earnings, of course, are going up. If you look at earnings for workers going sharply, look at quarterly wages in Riverside County from the QCW. This is through the second quarter of the year, $14,000 per quarter. That's vastly higher. It's 40% higher than it was a decade ago. Good things happening out here, no doubt about it. The story, of course, of California and the lack of labor force boils down to a story of housing, or, again, lack thereof. Why hasn't California grown as much as Texas in the last 2 decades? Pretty simple. In the last 2 decades, Texas built 33% of their housing. 1/3 of all housing in Texas has been built in the last 20 years. Here in California, 14%. There you go. We're probably one of the few places in the United States where you could say it quite sincerely, if you build it, they will come. And if you don't, they will leave. And that is exactly what's happening. People are moving out. It's making our problems worse. So how do you fix this? Economic development, by the way, is completely changed. I've been telling Rob Moran this. He's hearing me finally, right? It used to be jobs, jobs, jobs. It's all about the jobs, right? Not anymore. Now it's workers. You don't need, it's not more jobs, better jobs. There's more jobs. In 2008, there were 5 people looking for every job opening in the United States. Today, there are 2 job openings for every unemployed person. You don't need jobs. You have too many jobs. You need workers. So how do you grow your workforce? Number 1, get more people to move to your neck of the woods. Build housing. Not complicated. But there's other parts to that as well, particularly if you're a little bit in a far-flung area. Look, a high desert's got lots of room to grow. They love to have people move there, and now, of course, some people only have to go into work a couple days a week. Maybe it's a good time to think about up there. But what does the high desert need to think about? It's not just housing. You need parks. You need good schools. You need entertainment zones that are family-friendly. You have to think about quality of life, which is a different kind of model. By the way, you can also think about getting more out of your existing population. How do we encourage seniors to work? How do we get more of our teenagers involved? Because candidly, between you and me, having your teenager work is probably better than having them take yet another, club or something to pad their resume so they get into a college. I tell you right now, one of the first things we look at, I don't care if they have a PhD in economics. Did you have a job in high school? No? Sorry, next. Because people need to know how to work. It's part of life, right? So how do we get more of those folks to go out there and be part of it? Oh, and then women. You guys are lazy. Seriously. Women in the United States have the lowest participation rate in the developed world. What's wrong with you people? Now, of course, I'm being completely obnoxious here. There's no complication for why this occurs. We're the one major developed country that doesn't do what? Thank you. We don't have public child care. Gee, and then women are forced to to go home, to stop their career, stop their job. It's bad for the employer. It's bad for the household. It's bad for her career. Again, it's not complicated. Pre-K education, people. You know, look, we've known for years. We've seen the results. This is amazing. Improves the educational outcome of the kid by a huge margin. Improves the financial capability of that family by a big part. Allows that woman to continue her career, which improves her long-run earnings. That's fantastic, but it's just a social policy. Well, now it's not. Now it's an economic one. Because you help the kid, you help the family, you help the woman, and you help a local business. So again, you need to think a little differently about this stuff. And then, of course, last but not least, productivity enhancements. 2019, 2018, all the Luddites were out, right? They had to do something. In 2018, the big story was, AI is coming for your job. Bring on the AI, people. And sincerely, I mean, a lot of development organizations need to focus on helping, particularly smaller mom and pop, small business, figure out how to adapt technology. Corporations know how to do this. They can handle it. But small companies need to learn how to integrate technology so you don't need as many people. This is the key to economic development in the future. Now, in the meantime, I don't anticipate we're going to be changing housing policies in California time in the near future. And almost assuredly, what that means is people are going to continue to leave. But to be clear, that's not just leaving. There's a swirl going on. We continue to have big inflows of people, particularly from overseas. And at the same time, yes, we're seeing big outflows as well. And the people who are coming in tend to be highly skilled, highly paid. And the people moving out tend to be lower skilled, lower paid. It's really a conversation about not housing affordability, but rather housing availability. Because what you're talking about here is simply the limited supply goes to the highest bidders, which are going to be higher income families. So in the meantime, we are upgrading at some level, and you certainly see it. I mean, look at the numbers. Here in the Inland Empire, there's been a 45% increase in the families making over $150K in 3 years. Now again, some of this is the fact that the local economy is upskilling, but a lot of it has to do with the swirl. Just a lot of higher skilled people are moving in out here. The number of families making over $150K went from 250,000, this is in all of Southern California, went from 250,000 in 2010 to 550,000 in 2020. So there's a lot of income in the area right here. And again, I go back to the basic idea. You think about the Inland Empire. This is a rapidly growing economy whose housing affordability is middle of the pack, that has a relatively high share, actually, of families making over $100K a year. Yes, not as high as Orange County or San Diego, but higher than Harris, Texas, Maricopa, Arizona, right? I mean, let's be clear what we're talking about here. You live in one of the most powerful economies in the nation, two of the biggest counties in the nation, economically. Fantastic place to be. It's all about housing, and yet again, the one thing I'm disappointed in is housing. There's just not enough permits. They're still running only 2,000 single-family permits per quarter. Contrast that to almost 8,000 in the run to the Great Recession. Now, I admit that might have been a little too much, but this is a little too little. And I'm particularly concerned on the multifamily front, because the real shortage we have in California is not single-family, it's multifamily. We desperately need lots and lots and lots of multifamily. And that's particularly true in the resort areas that have the most shortage of workers. I mean, look at the Coachella Valley. What a renaissance that place is going through. Problem is, they don't have any workers. Why? I gave a talk out there too long. I pointed out, I go, so here's a little quiz. How many multifamily permits have been permitted in the Coachella Valley in the last 3 years? I'll give you a hint. It's less than 1. And you wonder why you can't get enough workers. It's crazy. It's crazy what we are not doing. Speaking of housing, by the way, housing was supposed to zag, and then it zigged, right? Oh, 30% of homeowners are going to stop paying their mortgage. That was Zandy's nonsensical line. And instead, the housing market took off, and over the last 2 years, we've seen about a 35% increase in housing prices, one of the most spectacular increases in prices this nation has ever seen. Now, of course, Zandy's talking for a housing market correction. And by the way, back in 2019, Zandy told us we had a housing recession, right? Which really begs the question, why does anybody interview Mark Zandi anymore? Now, I'm picking on Zandi, of course, and to be honest, when you actually hear him in news, he's a little more calm than the headlines would have you believe. But nevertheless, it just goes on and on and on. Why do we keep saying this to ourselves? Look, I understand the housing market took off like crazy. There's no doubt about it. Prices right now here in the Inland Empire, for example, are well over 500,000. In Los Angeles, they're approaching $1 million. San Francisco, they're off the charts. It's just crazy numbers. There's no doubt about it. But it's everywhere. This is not a California situation. One of the interesting things about the numbers, of course, is that our prices have been 80% more expensive than the rest of the nation for about a decade now. So this is really a national story. It's not a local story, as the case may be. And as far as affordability goes, again, we're about the same as everybody else. It's interesting. Right now, according to the 2020 data, about 28% of California homeowners were housing cost constrained, used about 30% or more of their income to support their housing, which is the second worst in the nation, but not all that different from Florida, and actually a little less than Hawaii. But to be clear, that number it was 40% a decade earlier. So in California, all those high prices we've seen, actually the amount of income homeowners are spending on their housing has come down pretty sharply, which is why I keep having this conversation with policymakers. California housing is so unaffordable. That's true for everybody except for the people buying it. And that is, of course, the situation we're dealing with. The real thing that happened out there all had to do, again, with some long-run issues and some short-run issues. The long-run issue had to do with the fact that the housing market fully recovered from the Great Recession roughly 2015, and that's when ownership rates started to go up again, right? But what was interesting is, remember, miserabilism. And miserabilism kept scaring all those home builders. We never saw a big pop, and usually, home builders are always the most overly optimistic people in any room, okay? That's what they do. If you're a real estate developer, you're either incredibly pessimistic or incredibly optimistic. It just depends what month it is, okay? So typically, when things start to get better, they go crazy. Not this time. This time, they never kept up with demand when things started to shift. And of course, when the pandemic hit, people started grabbing up anything that was available, and suddenly vacancy rates for housing went from record low levels to insanely low levels. Which is interesting because that's not the story. In 2019, we were told housing was in a recession. It was in a downturn. And I kept saying, no, the fundamentals are fine. That's ridiculous. Fundamentals are fine. That's ridiculous. But I couldn't argue with the basic facts that sales were low, price growth was slowing, and there was a lot of pessimism. And again, you start to realize you have to pay attention to the narrative and pay attention to the data. The data told me housing was fine. What I should have been listening to, or at least paying better attention to, was the fact all those people in 2019 were walking up to me and saying this question, so Chris, when are home prices going to fall? Now note the question, not are they going to fall, when are they going to fall? It's going to happen. We all know that. As soon as the market gets cool, prices fall by 20%. No, that's not what happens in housing markets. That only happens when a complete, utter calamity hammers the housing market, which is exactly what happened during the Great Recession. Tons of bad debt, prices vastly higher than they needed to be. Huge amount of speculation by people who should never be allowed to speculate. Massive amounts of overbuilding. It was the perfect storm, which, by the way, is so overused in the paper. But that time, it was an honest-to-God perfect storm. And yes, prices collapsed and collapsed rapidly. But there was no perfect storm in 2019. Market fundamentally is about as healthy as I've ever seen it. But that wasn't the story. Think about it. Housing is a relatively illiquid market. What percent of homes in any neighborhood actually trade on an annual basis? 1%? So in a market that's illiquid, it only takes a little bit of fear to cause people to take a step back and think, well, I'll be a strategic. I'll wait 6 months, and our prices aren't going up anyway. Who knows, they'll come down. Maybe we'll get a great deal. And when everybody does that, sales goes down, which causes prices to go too slow, which causes, of course, more people to believe the housing market's tipping into a downturn. Pay attention to the story. Now you get into the pandemic and something completely different happens. Suddenly interest rates start to come down, and people are sitting in their home, and tons of money is building up in their checking account because they're not going to restaurants, they're not going to Disneyland, they can't find anything to buy because there's nothing left. And they say, you know, it's a few months in, maybe we just need to do this, take advantage of the low interest rates. Sure, let's do that. I tell you what, honey, I saw an open house in the paper. Let's walk around the corner, just take a look, just for fun, just for fun. Okay, so they get their masks on, and they walk down the street, and they see the line of 382 people with exactly that idea that morning. Let the bidding wars begin. The market takes off. Boom, away you go. Now, of course, things are slowing down. Mortgage apps are down, and we all know it's because interest rates are up. Mortgage rates are almost 6%, which is still the lowest they've ever been before 2006. So please, spare me. But, you know, people are freaking out. But look, pending home sales have come down a bit. I get that. But is this really going to destroy the housing market? You know, I lived on commissions as a kid. My father was a real estate broker. And I remember asking him, I said, you know, in your years as a real estate broker, what were your best years? You know what he said? 83, 84, 85. What were interest rates in 83, 84, 85? 14%. So don't tell me high interest rates kill real estate markets. It just changes the terms. And yeah, interest rates are going up, and everybody's figuring it out. But that doesn't mean the housing market's going to collapse, particularly not with the fundamentals we have right now. Take, for example, something as simple as equity. Because in the end, if interest rates are higher, you use more equity and less debt. Well, do Americans have equity? Oh, yeah. Listen, a decade ago, there was about $10 trillion of equity in the U.S. housing market in real terms. Today, it's $28 trillion. Housing equity is almost 3 times what it was a decade ago. $28 trillion. By the way, the debt-to-equity ratio in U.S. housing right now is the same as it was in 1983. We're ready for high interest rates, people. This isn't a market that's going to collapse. You're talking 2 months' supply of existing homes for sale. 2 months. The new home market's a little thicker, I get that. But existing homes, 2 months' supply. This is not a market that's going to collapse. Everybody's taking a breather. Trust me, housing's going to get going again. Now, there are some signs of froth. Look, they threw so much money at the economy, you're going to see some bubblish activity. PE ratios, that is to say, home prices to asking rents for Class A apartments are going up. Housing units per capita are going up, suggesting flipping behavior. Now we're starting to see some bubblish behavior as a result of the stimulus they needlessly threw at the economy. But it's going to take years for this to become toxic, particularly when we have inventory levels this tight. So I'm not worried about it. I'm really not. As for apartments, they're taking off again, too. Rents jump like crazy. Vacancy rents have started to fall. Median rents aren't all that bad. And again, everybody's flipping out about rents going up. Oh, renters are going to get crushed. Renters are going to get crushed. Hold on, people. Look, rents don't just zoom up. It's not like there's a smoke-filled room where all of Southern California's landlords get into and go, ha, 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 we'll get them this year, guys, won't we? Rents go up because of demand, people, not because of supply. There's been no supply shortage of apartments. They're coming online. This is a demand phenomenon. That's why rents are going up. We have a lot of demand for housing. Build more. Permits down here, again, one of my biggest problems in some parts, you're just not seeing the permits, especially the multifamily. 2019, great period for multifamily permits, done since then. Multifamily needs to be built. As for non-res markets, they're fine. Property prices continue to go up. Nationally, construction is going up. Lending is fine. Those markets are fine. Great year for permits going on right now out here. Good, solid numbers. A lot of that, of course, has to do with the fact that the biggest, most important part of the commercial real estate industry out here, we all know, is warehousing. And warehousing has gone absolutely nuts. Look at these vacancy rates over here for warehousing. 6% in the Inland Empire. In Corona, 7% vacancy rate. This is almost half what it was a year ago. It's crazy. Just the entire market's going nuts right now. Now, office, of course, it's interesting because at the beginning of this thing, everybody said office is dead and industrial is the Cinderella. And that's that. Winner, loser, call the match over. Not so fast. Office is starting to shift. A lot of companies are having their Elon Musk moment, if you will, with their employees, which is good. By the way, if we need a smoke-filled room, can we all do it now? Can we all have a little collusion here? I say we all agree that we're going to make our employees come to the office all the time as much as possible from here on out. Can we do that? Can we just, thank you. All right. We're all agreed. No backsliding, okay? No cheating out there. But office is firming up. So talk to the office guys. Suddenly there's a lot of demand for office again. Now, what you're looking for is you're looking for a nice office space to encourage people to come in. And of course, on the other side of it, there's no doubt that industrial's gone through the roof. But remember, industrial is going a little crazy, in part because of the pandemic, in part because of the movement to goods purchasing, the fact that supply chains are struggling to catch up. This is all, of course, part of the big industrial surge. Some of this is long run. I get that. People are permanently going to get more and more of their products delivered to their doorstep rather than buying it. But at the same time, you got to understand that some of this heat in the industrial space is temporary, driven by the conditions that we're in right now. So I'm a little worried. That they're getting ahead of themselves. So there's a little bit of pushback going on out here in the Inland Empire against industrial. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You don't want to overdo it. This might be a good time to prevent some of the worst, shall we say, excesses in that particular market. Thinking about other things. And actually, at some level, the fact that there's a 3.4% unemployment rate in the Inland Empire right now is also dissuading some of these investors. Because actually, one of the biggest challenges for any of these guys is having enough people to man your warehouse. So they are starting to look at field. So not necessarily a bad thing. Oh, and just quickly before we get into the last part of this, I got to talk about water. Because we have a drought. We've had a drought for a number of years, but it's gotten really bad this year. We all know that. And the governor is very upset about it. He keeps telling us how upset he is. As far as I can tell, he hasn't done anything else, but he has told us how upset he is. And this bothers me, okay? Look, we don't have enough workers. We can agree with that, right? So what's happening to worker earnings? They're going up. We don't have enough apartments, so what's happening to rental prices? Going up. We have a little bit of an oil shortage because of the problems with Russia. What happened to the price of oil? Okay, we have a major drought. What's happened to the price of water? No, nothing. It doesn't go up. Our agencies that deliver water are legally required to deliver that water to you at cost. And by the way, water shortages don't factor into the cost of delivering water. And this is where I start having a real problem. So we love markets. Markets work for us. And price mechanisms allocate scarce resources in ways that are optimal. I can go through the litany of why market mechanisms are good. Why is it that for one of the most insanely important natural resources we need here in Southern California, we don't have any markets? Why do we allocate water on the basis of 110-year-old contracts written when this was a primarily empty agrarian economy? Why is it we have a massive drought and prices aren't going up? Can someone explain to me if Sacramento is so concerned about the drought that they're not actually doing anything realistic about dealing with it? This is where I start getting frustrated. And by the way, the big thing they're talking about in Sacramento is maybe we should just outlaw people having lawns. How dare you have grass in your front yard? Well, I tell you what, I'll get rid of my grass when the 20,000 acre of grass in Imperial County called hay, when they get rid of their lawns. Because this state still produces a shocking amount of hay that we grow in the desert, which is an incredibly water-consuming crop. That's worth basically nothing. And it gets even more absurd when you realize that a quarter of our hay crop is put on boats and shipped to Korea and Japan. I don't care what they own the land or not. It's ridiculous. We shouldn't be exporting hay. They shouldn't be growing it out there. They shouldn't have that water. It's amazing. And people point a finger at the nut farmers. I'm not pointing a finger at farmers. I'm pointing a finger at hay. Because wine grapes, they're worth growing. Trust me. Again, what are we talking about, right? What are we doing? Anyway, enough of that. I got to talk about the current. I'm having so much fun. I haven't gotten to the meat of the presentation yet. And you're like, dude, I got dinner in 10 minutes. All right, let's move on. Look, I get it. People are upset. Why? Inflation's heating up. Rates are going up. Stock markets come down. It's a bear market. It's not a bear market. When the market goes up 50% and then comes down 20%, that's not a bear market. That's called the return to rationality. It's still way up over the last couple years. It's crazy. Consumer confidence has collapsed to where it was in 2008 right now. Leave that in your head just for a second. Consumer confidence today, according to the University of Michigan survey, is the same as it was in 2008. In 2008, there were 5 people looking for every job, not 2 job openings for every person looking for a job. In 2008, home prices were collapsing, not going up at a record pace. In 2008, earnings were going down, not being at a 30-year high. What the hell are we angry about? By the way, that's not a punchline. That's really scary. It tells you a lot more about our narratives than the economic reality. People are angry in this country, and they have no reason. The question is what's going to happen when they do? Because they're about to. The current state of our economy is driven by the crazy amount of stimulus they use. For every dollar of lost income households suffered from, the federal government gave us back $2.60. I'm not kidding. And that's only a portion of what they doled out. Don't even get me started on the PPP loans. They can't spend enough, right? I mean, look at this. We went, in year 2000, we had a 60% debt to GDP ratio. We added 40% of that during the Great Recession, and we just added another 25% more. And we're like 125% debt to GDP. Right now, we have a $1 trillion structural deficit at the federal level. In other words, we still have their foot on the fiscal stimulus gas pedal. $1 trillion a year, people. And by the way, they'll want to do more. My last couple days, Democrats are pissed at Joe Manchin again. Why? Because they want another $1.2 trillion deficit bill. Huh? What are you doing? Folks, boomers, retiring, Medicare, Social Security, those things haven't gone away. No one's talking about them. Unbelievable. And then, of course, you got Mr. Powell, who, hey, man, I'm going to save this economy from the Depression. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what the last guy did. I'm going to drop federal funds rate to 0, and I'm going to do quantitative easing. And he did. Ben Bernanke, $3.5 trillion in QE over 6 years. Powell, $3 trillion over lunch. I'm not kidding you. They made the call over lunch, and within 3 weeks, $3 trillion in quantitative easing. And then he went and did $2 trillion more. Just 'cause. Well, no, not just 'cause. Look, the difference between a recession and depression is deflation. We know this. This isn't complicated. So we had a really bad recession that had Ben Bernanke not dealt with the deflationary pressures of the financial crisis, would have turned into a depression. But he did the right thing. $3.5 trillion QE, balanced it out, and it was just a bad recession. Well done. What financial crisis? Back then, 3% loss write-offs in the banking system per quarter. Right now, there's almost none. Back then, home prices were falling 15% year over year. Now they're up 20%. Back then, record number of foreclosures and bankruptcies. Now there are none. What are you doing? Now, this is craziness. And by the way, it's not rocket science. In fact, a book, Money Mischief, Milton Friedman, wrote it in like 1982 or 3. Fantastic book, 250 pages. Been reprinted multiple times. You can buy it on Amazon for $14. I suggest you all buy it because it lays it all out. The problems with too much money. What happens? Well, first thing that happens is money illusion. You throw out the money at the economy, people feel rich. They spend like crazy. Interest rates go down. Asset markets jump. The economy is on fire. But it's not sustainable. What you've done is you've increased demand beyond the capacity for the economy to meet that demand. By the way, that's why prices start to go up, to re-equilibrate. And the problem with prices going up is it causes the economy to stall, not go into recession. Inflation doesn't cause recessions. It causes an economy to stall. And the reason for that is in an inflationary environment, it's really hard to invest, to save, to plan, to do anything. It's like putting a giant fog bank across the economy, and it's just hard to move forward. So it slows to a crawl, stagflation they call it, which I don't really like because it makes it sound like you could have a healthy inflationary economy. No, every inflation economy is a stagflation economy. That's just how it works. But the problem here is no one wants to acknowledge that. They all like the warm fuzzies that came at the beginning of the money surge. And so therefore, what they do is they go out of their way to avoid dosing out the tough medicine necessary to get rid of it. So you can't miss what he did. I mean, just look at that. Look at the difference in money supply growth. One of the grossest mistakes ever made by the Federal Reserve since, of course, they failed to deal with deflation in 1929 when the stock market collapsed and the banking system fell apart. Worst mistake ever made. And it's obvious to everybody except for the people in the Federal Reserve, who apparently, to the T, have never read Money Mischief. And here we go again. Now, again, we feel good. We should feel good. I mean, think about it. 5-year cumulative growth rate. They set the asset markets on fire. That led to $40 trillion in household net worth in 5 years. $40 trillion. We've never seen such a greater expansion of just basic wealth. I always loved it. Every time you pick up the paper, they're like, oh, earnings aren't keeping up with inflation. People are not going to be able to spend anymore. Yeah, they can. They're not spending out of earnings. They're spending out of $40 trillion of new wealth. And oh, by the way, it's not just Jeff Bezos and company. The way they threw this money out, the bottom 50% saw bigger increases in their net worth than the top 1%. Now, don't get me wrong, wealth inequality we need to deal with. We've got a long ways to go. But the bottom half has seen their fortunes increase substantially, and they're out there trying to catch up. They're trying to spend it. And it's obvious we have a binging economy. Trade balance as a percent of GDP, 5%. You look at consumer spending as a percent of GDP, it's close to the highest it's ever been. We're a nation in the midst of a massive consumption binge, an unsustainable consumption binge, driven by, of course, this false sense of wealth. And yes, that turns into inflation. Now, yes, we got a 9% number. The real number is the PCE number, which is about 6% year over year. It's probably going to be higher in the second quarter, probably close to 7%. By the way, that's not as high as it is for structures. I mean, there are other parts of the economy that are seeing more inflation than that. And by the way, we're not the only country seeing inflation. It's across the globe because the whole world basically overstimulated, although no one did it quite as dramatically as we did. But before we start feeling too sorry for ourselves, can I put a little context in here? First of all, 5-year increase in consumer prices. We had 4 years of very low inflation, 1% per year. And then we had 1 year of about 7%. Excuse me if I break out my little violin for you, okay? That's only 15%, less than 15% inflation in 5 years. In 1979, it was 50% over 5 years. Okay? We haven't seen inflation really kick in yet. All right? We just haven't. And people are dipping into their savings. Yeah, savings rates just dropped below 5%. But then again, look how high it was. Think of all that accumulated wealth that people are trying to burn off. They're not dissaving yet. Are interest rates going up really a problem? Well, keep in mind that because everybody refinanced their mortgage, the financial obligation ratio is lower than it's ever been. And by the way, yes, interest rates are coming up, but they're still lower than inflation. That means real interest rates are negative. You never hear that, do you? Yes. If your earning is going up by 6% and your mortgage is 4%, that's a negative interest rate. So can we, cool it just a little bit? And yes, the markets are cooling up. The stock market has come down. But then again, look how high the PE ratio was. It had to. It's called gravity. VC capital is cooling off, and some tech companies are laying off some people. Again, venture capital doubled from 2020 to 2021. Do people really think there's that many new good ideas? Of course things are going to cool off. Bitcoin is now at 20K. 20K more, it'll be at fundamental par value. Think about it. Millennials, Ponzi, P-O-N-Z-I, look him up, Wikipedia, Italian guy. Wink, wink. I mean, even gasoline. Everybody's flipping out about gasoline prices. They're high, they're high. I know they're high. But the story in the paper, this is a supply shock, right? Oh, problem, and we have to go beg Saudi Arabia to produce more because Russia can't produce any. It's terrible, and everybody's getting hammered. No. Folks, if it was just a supply shock, price goes up and quantity consumed goes down. You remember? Right? Look at vehicle miles driven. Have they budged? Haven't blinked. Not the tiniest bit. I drove down here today. I saw a hell of a lot more pickup trucks than I did see Priuses, people. Okay? Spare me. I'm tired of it. I'm exhausted by this. You don't need to buy pickup. You don't need to drive pickup trucks and SUVs. There's electrics. There's hybrids. By the way, why do you need to drive at all? Jeff Bezos will happily deliver anything your little heart desires to your front door for free if you're Prime. Stop. Just stop. No. We're all going to get a bunch of checks from Gavin Newsom now. Look, it says, they just make excuses. Oh, it's supply chains. No, it's not. It's federal deficit. No, it's not. Greedy corporations. No, it's not. Not enough bank. No. Stop it. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. We know this. Janet Yellen knows this. You overdid it. There's too much demand. And now you got to tell people, I'm sorry, we overdid it. You're not that rich. And nobody wants to hear that. So what do? They dither. They produce ridiculous forecasts. Look at this forecast. This just came out from Barclays. It's the same thing. Oh, this is the peak. This is the peak. For 7 months in a row, they told us this is the peak. It's not the peak. How do I know? Money supply. Look, it's a very simple relationship between the size of the economy and the size of the money supply. It's called prices. If you increase the amount of money by 40%, you got to have a 40% increase in prices, period. Of that 40%, we're about 6-7% in. That means, unless they get rid of the money supply, we have 33% more inflation before we re-equilibrate. And by the way, if we have 30% more inflation, velocity is going to increase, which means we're going to have 40% more inflation. So you think we have seen inflation? You got nothing. It's going to come and come and come and come until they get serious and start to do quantitative tightening. But they don't want to do that. And why? Because, again, they're afraid of the political and economic consequences. I love this. This is the New York Times. I admit, it's kind of picking on the weak link in the chain. But anyway. Good morning. The government's plan to fight inflation could cost jobs and restrict wage growth. The government's plan to fight inflation is supposed to cost jobs and cut wage growth. That's how you diminish demand, thus diminish inflation. You see? It's not to be scared of. What you need to be scared of is how they're going to do it, which is taking negative interest rates and making them strongly positive. Go back to 1980. See what Volcker did? So you think interest rates are high now? Mortgage rates double digits? Very possible. Very possible. Now, ultimately, that itself, that could be a rough patch. But you got to throw on the real scary thing, which is, again, the $30 trillion in federal debt, of which, to be clear, you're talking about $30,000 in debt collected for every man, woman, and child in the last 5 years in this country, and $1 trillion structural deficit right now. Now, just think about what happens when interest rates start to go up. One of the reasons they've gotten away with borrowing so much money over the last 20 years is because interest rates have gone down. Thus, the federal interest payment as a percent of GDP has actually dropped. But not anymore. So you think about it. Our current deficit at the national level is about 4% of GDP. About 3% of GDP. But what happens when interest rates start to go up? Well, interest payments are going to go up substantially. Right now, they're running about 2% of GDP. But let's say that goes up by 50%. Now it's 3% of GDP. That just added 1% of GDP to the deficit, which means they have to borrow more, which causes interest rates to go up more, which causes the interest rate payments to go up more. And this is where stuff really starts to get ugly. And you realize that the only solution here is, of course, to substantially raise taxes or cut spending. Thus, the monetary shock will be accompanied by a fiscal shock. And that is where it gets ugly, particularly in a world where politicians can't even acknowledge that our economy is currently overheated. So I'm really worried. I'm also worried about Sacramento. Oh, they are happy up there. I gave a talk not too long ago with Fiona Ma, and she was talking about the joy and jubilation of spending $100 billion in the form of a surplus that our state has. And what's amazing to me is the debate up there is, do we spend it all on expanding permanent programs, or we just do one-time things? And the answer is, you do none of the above. History's pretty clear. The huge surge in revenues and the surpluses we saw in the late 90s were followed by $25 billion deficits that lost Gray Davis's job. The huge surpluses we saw in the run to the Great Recession caused $35 billion deficits and caused John Chung, our state controller, to have to issue IOUs to pay state vendors. Does no one else remember this? And here we go again. By the way, this time it's going to be $50 billion deficits. And you know who they're going to come after? You. Because they don't take care of it internally. It's not state programs that take it. It's money they give to local governments. So be prepared. Zahidi added it all up. Where does this go? You got real quiet at the end. You should have. But remember where we are right now. The economy's great because it's overheated. And you need to take advantage of that. You need to go down and make money while the economy's hot. And it's going to be hot for another year or more. But at some point in time out there, there is going to come a point in time where we have to deal with the reality of what we've done. And that means strong monetary and fiscal tightening. And the longer we wait, the more painful that's going to be. We have a 5% of GDP dairy deficit right now. If that gets to 6%, 7%, and on top of everything else, we suddenly have a big devaluation of the dollar, huge terms of trade shock. I mean, you can go through the litany of ways that this can ripple through the economy and have all sorts of ugly effects. It is not a pretty picture. Soft landing? I don't know how you do it. Oh, first thing is you got to have a Federal Reserve that actually understands what it's doing. Not this one that has been politicized to the point that we filled it up with people who don't understand their jobs. So I am worried about where this goes, but not yet. Not yet. Not yet. And the biggest thing of all goes back to what I was saying about the anger that's palpable in our economy right now. You see it online. You see it in politics. You see it in these ugly elections. Consumer sentiment is dropping despite the fact that on any piece of paper, if you ignore the public ledger, never has this nation been more prosperous. And we're angry. What happens when things really do get bad? So, folks, we all have to take a step back from the brink. We all need to cool the ridiculous rhetoric. We all need to stop with the edge and cliff and pretending that this nation is collapsing into something it's not. It's pretty obvious who our own worst enemy is. It's us. And the fact that we don't seem to understand history or context or anything, the fact that people are as upset today as they were in the Great Recession says people really kind of forgot what happened in the Great Recession. So, the best I can tell you, the thing I'm going to ask you the most, and again, I've said this before, chambers are a great place to do this, but everybody in this room, you need to be the convener. Every time you have these conversations, you need to tell people to settle down. You can't run an economy. You can't run a society where everybody's drawing lines in the sand and pretend that any kind of change is an existential threat. It's not. Human beings are a hell of a lot tougher than we give them credit for. And we need to stop pretending that any little change is going to upset you that badly. Change happens. It has to happen. And right now, we got to change as fast as possible. That was depressing. I'm trying to find a joke here at the end, and I'm failing miserably. But again, a couple things here. It's not the IE. The trends here are fantastic, and they're going to continue to be fantastic. And you're going to weather this storm very well. But it's out there, and you got to be part of the solution. So go out, prosper, have a good year, be careful, and again, be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. And, hopefully we'll make it through it.
Let's give a big round of applause for Dr. Thornburg. This is our second year having him as our speaker for this event, and I don't know about you guys, but I always feel like my mind is exploding at the end of listening to him talk. Can anybody relate to that? I'm going to say yes. One of the things that I also like to look at is what I see as opportunities, and one of the things that I've appreciated last year, and I know that some of our businesses took this to heart, was just about the opportunities that lie in the Inland Empire, our local area, and I know that as a result of this talk last year, a lot of our businesses changed their strategies about the areas that they were going to focus in moving more towards into the Inland Empire. We have a lot of great leaders here, a great community, and I just want to encourage all of you to to take his advice, and let's continue to make this one of the most prosperous areas in the country. With that, I want to say to our sponsors, we thank you once again for your continued support in helping us put together events such as this. To our audience, thank you for taking the time to attend our event today and for your support of the Chamber Business Alliance and our mutual interests in North Orange County, Western Riverside County, and San Bernardino County regions. Thank you guys, and have a great rest of the day.